The rain was beating down on the taxi window, reflecting Damon Carlyle's restless thoughts as he made his way home from Seattle-Tacoma Airport. After a week in San Francisco, he was feeling drained, but the promise of seeing Avery again lifted his spirits. At 36, Damon had reached the pinnacle of his career as a financial. After a long day at work, Damon couldn't wait to get home. He hopped into a cab and told the driver to take him to their modern Seattle residence. As he walked in, he couldn't help but smile. The house was quiet, with only the soft padding of paws breaking the silence. Damon greeted their golden retriever Max on the hardwood floor, scratching him behind the ears. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Where's Avery?" Normally, Avery would be there to welcome him home with a bright smile that would wash away the stress of his travels. But today, there was something different. A niggling sense of unease crept into Damon's mind as he looked around the house. He called out, but there was no answer. Shrugging off his coat, Damon made his way upstairs, with Max following behind him. As he approached their bedroom, he was hit by a foul odor, his pace quickening. The sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Their king-sized bed was soaking wet, the sheets rumpled, and the mattress saturated with something. The stench was overpowering, and it made his eyes water. The bed, usually a haven of comfort, was soaking wet. The sheets were rumpled, and the mattress seemed to be saturated with something. The stench was overpowering, a harsh chemical smell that made his eyes water. "What the hell?" Damon muttered, approaching the bed cautiously. He touched the sheets, his fingers coming away damp. The smell clung to his skin, making him to recoil. The sound of the front door opening jolted him from his inspection. Moments later, Avery's voice drifted up the stairs. "Damon, are you home?" He turned to face the bedroom door. His mind racing, he called back. His voice was steady despite the turmoil in his gut. Avery appeared in the doorway. Her face was flushed, and her hair was slightly disheveled. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. "Oh God, I'm so sorry about the mess." Damon's gaze narrowed. "What happened here?" Avery let out a nervous laugh, running a hand through her hair. "It's so embarrassing. Max knocked over a bottle of cleaning fluid while I was changing the sheets. I've been airing out the room, but I guess the smell is still pretty bad." Damon's eyes flicked to Max, who was sitting quietly in the hallway. The dog tilted his head, as if equally confused by the explanation. "Cleaning fluid," Damon repeated, his tone neutral. "That's quite a spill," Avery nodded quickly. "I know, right? I'll get it cleaned up. How was your trip?" The abrupt change of subject didn't go unnoticed. Damon's instincts were honed. After years of analyzing complex financial situations, he was convinced something was off. But he kept his face impassive. "It was fine," he replied, moving towards her. "He missed you," he said, leaning in to kiss her. But Avery turned her head slightly, so his lips only grazed her cheek. Another red flag, he thought. "I missed you too," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Let me take care of this mess. Why don't you go relax? I'm sure you're tired from the flight." Damon nodded slowly. "Sure, I'll unpack." As he left the room, he could hear Avery bustling about, stripping the bed with what seemed like unnecessary haste. His mind was already working overtime, analyzing every detail of their interaction. The next few days passed in a blur. It was a blur of meetings and paperwork, but Damon couldn't shake the feeling that had settled over him since his return. He found himself watching Avery more closely, noting little things he might have overlooked before. There were late nights working on design projects that she was unusually secretive about, as well as unexplained expenses on their shared credit card. Sometimes she'd startle him when her phone buzzed quickly, dismissing notifications before he could see them. It all came to a head one evening, as Damon sat in his home office going over some financial reports. Avery poked her head in, smiling, but her eyes were nervous. "I'm heading out," she said. "I'm meeting a client about a new project. 30 p.m. It's 9:30 p.m. It's pretty late for a client meeting, isn't it, Avery? I know how it is with these celebrity types. They keep OD hours. Don't wait up." Before he could respond, she was gone. Damon sat back in his chair, the numbers on his screen blurring as his mind raced. He built his career on reading people, spotting inconsistencies and lies. He had a feeling that something was very wrong. The next morning, Damon made a decision. He couldn't confront Avery without proof. He also had this feeling that he was being played for a fool. So he did what he did best. He made "I've got another business trip coming up." He told Avery over breakfast, heading to Chicago next week for a finance conference. Avery nodded, not looking up from her phone. "How long will you be gone?" Just a few days, Damon replied, watching her closely. He saw a flicker of relief cross her face. You'll be fine on your own now. She did look up, her smile a little too bright. Of course, I've got plenty to keep me busy. You know me, always working on something. Damon forced a smile. You are. As soon as Avery left for her studio, Damon got to work, making a few discreet calls to arrange the purchase of High. When the cameras arrived, Damon spent hours installing them in their bedroom and other key areas of the house, making sure they were completely undetectable. On the day of his supposed trip, Damon kissed Avery goodbye and packed his suitcase as if he were really leaving. I'll call you when I land, he promised. Have a safe flight, Avery. Damon drove to the airport, went through security and boarded his flight. When the plane took off for Chicago, he wasn't on it. Instead, he checked into a hotel downtown, set up his laptop and prepared himself for what he might see. Hours passed. Damon watched. The feeds were making his heart pound. He'd been starting to think he'd made a terrible mistake. Then he saw something on the screen. A dark figure entered their home, heading straight for the bedroom. Damon leaned closer, his breath caught in his throat. What unfolded before his eyes shattered his world. It wasn't just one man, it was multiple. Avery greeted them with familiarity, laughing and flirting. The scene that followed was pretty disturbing. It was a betrayal so complete that Damon felt physically ill. The stench and wetness in the bed made it all make sense. But what struck Damon even more than the act itself was how casual it all seemed. This wasn't a one-off thing. Time mistake. This was a regular occurrence. Damon sat back, his mind oddly calm despite the turmoil in his heart. He'd built his career on making critical decisions that impacted millions of dollars, but now he was faced with the most important decision of his life. Lesser men might have rushed home and confronted Avery in a fit of rage, but Damon was not a lesser man. He valued loyalty and integrity above all else, and Avery had betrayed him. Damon knew there would be no forgiveness, no second chances. This called for something more, something calculated, methodical, and utterly devastating. As he watched the betrayal unfold on his screen, Damon began to plan. Avery and her lovers had no idea what was coming. They'd taken everything from him, and now he would take everything from them. The game was on, and Damon Carlyle played to win. The rain pelted the windows of the High. As he sat in the coffee shop, Damon's dark mood was reflected in the mirror. He was in a corner booth, drumming his fingers in an impatient rhythm on the polished wooden table. The door chimed, and a man in a nondescript gray coat entered, shaking water from his umbrella. Damon's old friend Caleb Hawthorne slid into the seat across from him. His eyes were sharp, and Caleb observed Damon's tense posture and said, "You look like hell, Damon." Damon's lips twitched in a humorless smile. "I feel worse than ever," he replied. A waitress approached, and Caleb ordered a black coffee. Once she left, he leaned forward and said, "What's this urgent matter? You couldn't discuss it over the phone?" He took a deep breath and tried to calm down. "Caleb, I need your particular set of skills. It's about Avery. It's trouble. It's over. It's dead. Damn it." He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "Take a look." His eyes widened as he swiped through the images. "Jesus. Damon. I'm sorry." Damon waved away the sympathy. "I don't want your pity. I want information. I need to know everything about these men she's with. Who they are, what they do, where they're vulnerable." Caleb studied his friend's face. "Is this just about the divorce?" he asked. "No," Damon replied. "It's about justice." Caleb nodded slowly. "All right, I'll get to work." "Right, I'll look into it, but Damon, be careful. Revenge is a dangerous game, as is betraying me." Damon replied, "How soon can you start? I'll begin today. Give me a week. I'll find out what there is to know." Caleb left, and Damon felt a cold sense of purpose settle over him. The week crawled by, with each day bringing exercise and restraint as Damon played the part of an unsuspecting husband. Ava's lies seemed more obvious now, her excuses transparent, but he bided his time, knowing that knowledge was power. Finally, Caleb called. "We need to meet now. The coffee shop. Come to my place." Caleb's apartment was sparse and functional. Maps and documents covered one wall. Damon recognized the wall from the videos, connected by reed ring. "It's worse than we thought," Caleb said without any fuss. "These aren't just random men. They're connected, powerful, and dangerous." Damon scanned the wall and looked at Caleb, who pointed to a photo of a distinguished-looking man in his 50 seconds. "That's the Mercer," Caleb said. He's got a lot on his plate. Avery's been seeing him for months. How deep does it go? Damon asked. Caleb sighed. There's another player you need to know about. He tapped another photo. Cole Radford. On paper, he's a business consultant. In reality, he's got ties to organized crime. Damon, Avery's not just cheating. She's involved with some very dangerous people. Damon absorbed this, his mind already calculating and planning. Are there any others with similar stories and powerful men and shady dealings? Avery's design projects were often covers for meetings. She's in deep. Damon, we're both at risk here, Damon said, his voice cold. Caleb nodded. These aren't men you want to cross. Whatever your plan is, I'm not backing down, Damon interrupted. They took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from them, Caleb said, studying his friend's face. You've changed, Damon replied. No, I'm just stopping pretending, Caleb said. Over the next few weeks, Damon threw himself into his work with a new intensity. His colleagues noticed, commenting on his laser focus and ruthless efficiency. But it wasn't just work occupying his mind every night after Avery had gone to bed. Damon sat in his study meticulously planning. He pored over financial reports, finding weaknesses and points of leverage. He began to move pieces into place. A carefully worded tip to the SEC. Here a strategic investment. They're small moves, unnoticed individually, but part of a larger plan. At home, he played the role of doting husband with Oscar, worthy of vision. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Damon decided to set the final trap. I've been thinking, he said, watching Avery over the rim of his wine glass. Maybe it's time for a change. Avery looked up from her tablet. What kind of change? Damon shrugged. A new chapter, maybe a bigger house. The trip to Europe we've been talking about got Avery's attention. She seemed excited, and Damon felt uneasy. She bought into the plan easily, just as he had for months. She asked, setting aside her tablet, what brought this on? Damon smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. He was thinking about life. Avery moved to sit beside him on the couch, curling into his side. Damon fought the urge to recoil. I love you, she murmured. I love you too, Damon replied, the words ash in his mouth later that night as Avery slept. Damon's phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. Need to talk, urgent. They met at a 24-hour diner. The fluorescent lights at the diner were harsh at 2 a.m., and Caleb looked tired and stressed. He was looking around the nearly empty restaurant. What is it? Damon asked as soon as he sat down. I found something about Cole Radford, Caleb replied. It's big. It's really big. Tell me he's not just connected to organized crime. He's a key player. Money laundering, extortion, you name it. She knows, Damon said. Caleb nodded. He was sure. She'd been helping launder money through her design business. Damon, this was serious. If this got out, she could go to prison. You could even go to jail if they thought you were involved. Damon sat back, his mind racing. This changed things. The stakes were higher now. The risk was greater, but so was the potential for revenge. Thank you, Caleb, Damon said, standing. Caleb caught his arm. Damon, be careful. These people are dangerous. Vegetables with quick, nervous movements. She jumped when he entered, nearly cutting herself. You're home early, she said, her voice pitched slightly too high. Damon leaned against the counter, watching her. What's the latest from the office, he asked. You hear any news? Avery's knife paused for a fraction of a second. News H, Damon hummed. There's been a big shakeup in the real estate world. There's a guy named F. Mercer. Does that ring any bells? The color drained from Avery's face. From Avery's face, I might have heard the name of one of my clients. I think it was Damon. His tone was conversational, and it was funny because I could have sworn I saw his name in your phone contacts the other day. Avery's eyes widened. You went through my phone, she said. No, Damon replied calmly. But thanks for confirming you do know him. The knife clattered to the cutting board. Damon, I can explain, he said. Can you? Damon interrupted, his voice cold and cutting. Can you explain the lies, the cheating, the criminal activities? Avery stumbled back, her back hitting the refrigerator. How do you know? Damon asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Avery's eyes welled up with tears. How do you know everything? She wailed. Every dirty little secret, every betrayal. Tears welled up in Avery's eyes. Damon, please. They made me do it. Thank Cole. They threatened me. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Damon said, You chose to betray me to risk everything we built to become a criminal. I'm sorry, Avery said, sobbing. Please, we can fix this. We can start over. Damon shook his head. His eyes were cold. Avery, we can't. It's too late for that. He turned to leave the kitchen. He paused in the doorway. Oh, Avery, I'd start packing if I were you. The police will be here soon. Damon was filled with a grim determination to see his plan through to the bitter end. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Fame Mercer's empire began to crumble, his assets frozen and his reputation in tatters. Cole Radford went underground, but Damon knew it was only a matter of time before the net closed around him too. And Avery was gone, arrested in a pre-dawn raid. The dawn raid, the shuttering of her carefully crafted life, and the destruction of her studio. Damon watched it all unfold with detached interest, like a chess player observing the endgame. But it wasn't over yet. There was one final move to make. Damon sat in his car outside a remote cabin in the woods, steeling himself for what was to come. His phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. He's on his way. Be careful. Minutes ticked by. Then, headlights cut through the darkness. A car pulled up and F. Mercer stepped out looking haggard and desperate. Damon got out of his car and faced the man who had helped destroy his life. Hello, F., he said calmly. F's eyes widened in recognition. You're Avery's husband? What is this? Where's Cole? Cole isn't coming, Damon explained calmly. It's just you and me. Was it all the C investigation and the leaked documents? Damon nodded. You took everything from me, so I returned the favor. F lunged forward, his face contorted with rage, but before he could reach Damon, a figure emerged from the shadows. Caleb had done it. In seconds, he was on the ground, his arm twisted behind his back. You've lost everything, Damon said, looking down at the man. Your money, your power, your freedom. It's all gone. What do you do now? F spat, struggling against Caleb's hold. Damon crouched down, meeting F's eyes. I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you brought this on yourself, that every action has consequences. He stood, nodding to Caleb. Let him up. Caleb released him. He scrambled to his feet, rubbing his arm. You have a choice, Damon said. Run, leave the country, start a new life. New life or stay and face the music. Either way, your life as you knew it is over. F looked between Damon and Caleb, desperation clear on his face. Without another word, he ran to his car and sped off into the night. Caleb came to stand beside Damon. Damon nodded. He was a coward at heart, and he'd run and leave Avery to it. Damon's jaw tightened as she made her choice. She'd live with the consequences. As they walked back to their cars, Caleb studied his friend. Was it worth it, Damon? Damon paused, looking up at the star. The sky was filled with stars as I drove back to Seattle. It was a long, quiet journey. Damon's mind was racing with everything that had happened, and everything that was still to come. There was the divorce to think about, as well as the inevitable questions and the restructuring of his life. But as the city skyline came into view, Damon felt something he hadn't in months. Peace. It wasn't happiness, not yet. But it was a start. He had lost everything, but in losing it all, he had found something he didn't know he possessed. An iron will and a capacity for ruthless action that had brought his enemies to their knees. He pulled into his driveway, and it was just his office that was gone. He allowed himself a small, grim smile. The game was over, and despite everything, he had won. The morning sun cast long shadows across his new office, and the Seattle skyline was a glittering backdrop to the empire he was rebuilding. 6 months had passed since the night at the cabin. 6 months of calculated moves and relentless focus. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He called out, not looking up from his computer screen. His assistant, Sarah, entered with a tablet in hand. Mr. Carlyle, you're 10. It's 10 already, and there's something else you should see. Damon raised an eyebrow. Show me. Sarah handed him the tablet, open to a news article. The headline made his lips curl into a cold smile. Real estate mogul, Mobile F. Mercer, found in South America. Extradition pending. Looks like his run is over, Damon mused. Handing the tablet back, Sarah hesitated. There's more, sir. It's about Miss Carlyle. I mean, UX. Damon's eyes narrowed. What about her? She's being released on good behavior. The charges were reduced. For a moment, the only sound in the office was the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Then Damon spoke. His voice was calm but edged with steel. Thank you, Sarah. Send him. I'll be in my office at 10. As Sarah left, Damon turned to the window and looked out at his reflection. He should have felt something, maybe anger or regret, but he didn't. She was a chapter of his life that he'd decided to close. The day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. Damon threw himself into his work with a fervor that impressed and unnerved his colleagues. His reputation had grown. He was now known as a man you didn't cross. He was a financial shark who could smell blood in the water from miles away as the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink. Damon's phone beeped with Caleb's name flashing on the screen. Damon. Caleb's voice was tense. We need to talk in person. It's about F. They met at their usual spot, the high-end coffee shop where it all began half a year ago. Caleb looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper. What's going on? Damon asked as soon as he sat down. Caleb leaned in, his voice low. This is about talking to the feds. Anyone who listens to him is in trouble. He's pointing fingers. Damon's face remained impassive. He didn't look at me directly, but he was hinting at things. If he connects the dots, he won't. Damon said firmly. There's nothing to connect. We made sure of that. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. Maybe, but Damon, it's not over yet, F. Cole Avery. They're all still out there, and they all have reason to want you to fall. Damon's eyes glinted with determination. Let them try. You're not worried, right? Damon laughed, a sound devoid of humor. No, I'm not worried. I'm ready as if on cue. Damon's phone buzzed. He answered the unknown number on speakerphone. This is Jerome, Mr. Mercer's lawyer. He wants to meet with you. Damon exchanged a look with Caleb. Does he know that? He says he has information about your wife. My wife about everything. He's willing to make a deal, but I'll meet him tomorrow at noon. He hung up without waiting for a response. Caleb leaned back, his face etched with concern. Damon, you know this is a trap. You have to be careful. The next day, as the clock struck noon, he walked into the remote cabin where he had last confronted the man. The place was dusty and abandoned, or so it seemed. Damon called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. I know you're here. Let's get this over with. A figure emerged from the shadows. Fame Mercer, once the picture of power and success, now looked haggard and desperate. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. Damon said, Thank you for coming to the meeting. I appreciate it, but I have a different idea. Let's talk. F took a step forward. I know what you did. I know how you orchestrated everything. I know about the SEC investigation and the leaked documents. I can prove it. Damon raised an eyebrow. Can you? Then why are we here? Why not go straight to the authorities? F's confidence was returning. I'm offering you a way out. Out a truce, Damon repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. There's no truce to be had here. You and your friends took everything from me. I simply returned the favor. F's face contorted with anger. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. Enlighten me, Damon said calmly. Cole F spat. He's not done. Neither is Avery. They're planning something big. When it hits, you'll. Damon stepped closer, his eyes boring into F's. Let me make something very clear. I don't make deals with people like you. I destroy them. Whatever Cole and Avery are planning, let them try. I'll be ready. Damon had F crumpled to the ground, and a small recorder skittering across the floor from his hand. He picked it up, a cold smile on his face. It was a recorded confession. How disappointing and predictable. He crushed the recorder under his heel. Then he crouched down next to F's prone form. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn yourself in. You're going to confess to everything. The fraud, the money laundering, all of it. You're going to leave my name out of it, F. He looked up, his eyes wide with fear. If I don't, Damon's voice was ice, then the world will see just how deep your crimes go. Every dirty deal, every bribe, every life you've ruined, it will all come to light, trust me. Prison will be the least of your worries. He stood, brushing off his suit. The choice is yours, but choose wisely. This is the last mercy you'll get from me. As Damon walked out of the cabin, he could hear the broken sobs behind him, but he felt no pity, no remorse, only a grim satisfaction. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, true to Damon's ultimatum. Fane turned himself in, confessing to a long list of crimes that sent shockwaves through the business world. Cole Radford's criminal empire began to crumble as his associates, sensing the end, turned on each other. Avery was her attempt to rebuild her life and start over, but it was a failure. She had nowhere to turn and her reputation was in tatters. Her once thriving design business was nothing more than a memory. One crisp autumn evening, Damon sat in his penthouse overlooking the city. His phone beeped with a message from Avery. He considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of him. He answered, "Hello, Avery." Damon's voice was calm but broken. "I need help. Please, I have nowhere else to turn." "Please," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I know I hurt you and I know I betrayed you, but I still love you. We can start over. Please, just give me another chance." Damon's grip tightened on the phone. "I love you, Avery. I don't know what you mean by love, but I know what love is. It's loyalty. It's trust. You threw that away for what? Money? Thrills? No, there are no more chances. No starting over. This is goodbye, Avery. For good." He sat on the couch for a while, looking out at the city lights. Then he went to his bar and poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, which he sipped as he reflected on his journey. He had lost everything, his marriage, his trust, and his illusions about the world. But in losing it all, he had gained something far more valuable, strength, and the knowledge that he could face the worst the world had to offer and come out on top. He could face the worst the world had to offer and come out on top. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Caleb standing there, looking grim. "It's done," Caleb said. "Cole Radford was arrested an hour ago. It's over. Damon really is over." Damon nodded and stepped aside to let Caleb in. He took a long sip of the offered glass. "What now?" he said, eyeing Damon carefully. "What now?" Damon walked to the window and looked out over the city he had conquered. "They thought they could break me, but instead they made me invincible." Caleb raised his glass in a toast to new beginnings. "No," Damon corrected, a cold smile playing on his lips, "to victory as the night deepened." Damon stood on his balcony, the cool breeze ruffling his hair, and looked out at the city sprawled out below him. Before him, a sparkling tapestry of lights and shadows. His city, now in many ways, he thought of Avery, off of Cole, of the life he had lost and the new one he had forged. From the ashes, there was no regret in his heart, no longing for what might have been. Only a cool, unwavering resolve. They had tried to destroy him. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and everything. Damon Carlyle raised his glass to the night sky in a silent toast to the future, the battles yet to come, and the empire he would build on the ruins of those who had wronged him. He had won, but in the world of power and revenge, there was always another game waiting to begin. Damon was ready, more than ready, eager.